SUSE is a global leader in innovative, reliable, secure enterprise-grade open-source solutions relied upon by more than 60% of the Fortune 500 to power their mission-critical workloads. They specialize in business-critical Linux, enterprise container management and edge solutions, and collaborate with partners and communities to empower customers to innovate everywhere, from the data center to the cloud to the edge and beyond. SUSE puts the open back in open source, giving customers the agility to tackle innovation challenges today and the freedom to evolve their strategy and solutions tomorrow.
Welcome to episode 5, Kubernetes Center of Excellence, brought to you by our friends at SUSE. We've got Rob here. We've got Derrick here. It's been a while. Very excited for what we're going to do. Guys, how we doing?
Good. Derrick, you?
I'm good. I'm still waking up. My coffee has not hit me the way I would hope it would.
You must be on first cup.
That's true.
Cup 3. For my friends at Grumpy Cafe.
We've moved to Diet Coke. That's how far in the day it is for us.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's deep. You're yearning for the weekend. I can tell.
When your company's based out of Europe, you get up earlier. I think people realize that you get up earlier. Fridays, they're up and at 'em on Fridays. So I get a lot of early mornings on Fridays.
That's a good point. Good.
So it's been a while. So we're on episode 5. Has it been how many episodes?
It has. Yeah, it's 5. There was a little half episode. Where I did a monologue. That was thrilling.
Solid.
A monologue.
It was a lot of passion there. I have to admit. I was like, you were on a next level of passion. So I think I tweeted that one. I was like, hey, I'll put that one out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was a little. I just felt like I had to say something, and I think it was nice. I think.
Was it about coffee? Was that a topic?
No, it was not about coffee. That one will be episode 7. How Kubernetes makes coffee better.
We'll find a way.
I'm sure someone's done that. The Kubernetes powered coffee pot. The makerspace out there has probably done it. It's probably a Raspberry Pi with K3s. Running something to make coffee, schedule it, the whole 9 yards. I'm sure if we Google that, someone out there will Google that and post it on the YouTube channel here. Just be like, here, someone's already done it.
You fed me a line, so now I have to rant. It's happening. So if they could create a coffee machine and it ran K3s on it, and it could regulate the temperature of the water to the right temperature with any type of efficiency, then it'd be a big win. You could say Kubernetes made coffee better, because the dirty secret here is like the Mr. Coffee, all your traditional kind of coffee pots you get at like Target or Walmart or whatever. They don't regulate temperature very well. So there's about 3 or 4 on the market that actually do, and they tend to be $200-$300.
I don't know if it would be Kubernetes though. That'd be more about the sensor for the water and the temperature gauging, right? Like more than it would be about Kubernetes specifically.
But is it the temperature as it's brewing, or is it the temperature of the pot holding it warm? Because mine boils the coffee. Like after 15 minutes, I'm like, I'm not drinking the slop, right? So is it what is that magic sauce for you?
Yeah. So
where does it need to manage so we understand?
So when you're brewing, you want to be in the low 200s, right? So just below boiling. That's kind of the optimal temperature to extract coffee. And a lot of the Mr. Coffee, or I'm kind of picking on them. That's not very nice. But, your generic $50, $60 coffee makers, a lot of the water doesn't even hit 200 degrees. So it actually under extracts the coffee. So just like in anything, and so coffee and food is my thing. That's what I'm passionate about, along with technologies and Kubernetes. But the thing with brewing coffee is if your coffee is really great, then you have to have the right elements like the right temperature of water and the right grind. And if you do all that, you can make a really great cup of coffee. And one of the big challenges for the regular consumer at home is like the regular coffee pot just doesn't make it happen. And so if K3S can solve for that, wow, we're moving on.
I don't know if there's a big enough amount of people that like are as passionate about you as coffee versus they're just like, just give me caffeine that has the resemblance of coffee.
That's correct. No one cares.
Yeah, but I think I have to. So, in my role in the community space around Kubernetes and open source everything, you'd be surprised when you come to the table with a Raspberry Pi and K3S and what people would try to do with it. It's amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
we are beyond. Oh, I have my personal website running on that. I'm like, oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, everyone's done it. Now it's like, what can I power with K3S? A couple containers on a Raspberry Pi, and then the problems I solve. And when I see some of the stuff, you go on that Twitter dive, like the good Twitter dive, and what you see some of these makers doing, you're like, wow. I was like, dang, I'm like, and then I feel like embarrassed for like me putting on a course about here's how to put K3S on a Raspberry Pi, and here's something. Because some of these people are doing stuff that it's at that next level, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone's out there going like, all right, here's a sensor, here's a heating element, and we're gonna make coffee the Nick way, right? Like this is Nick's, like this is for you, Nick, and they're just going to put this whole setup together and just tell you how they did it. That's what I love about that space, is that the maker space of K3S is absolutely bar none one of the coolest things to watch.
Well, if you come across that, tag me because I want to see that. That'd be cool. And also now the whole coffee industry, like the real one, has a hit on me. They're like, oh, it's the Nick way. What did they show? Yeah. They're gonna get knocked over in the streets of Atlanta.
Well, I think the coffee industry as of late has they have worse problems. I think it was outlined in the pandemic where coffee, the price of coffee spiked there for a minute. I'm like, I'm paying what for this, and this is already fair trade. I'm like, this is this much. And so when they were hit with those supply chain issues through the pandemic, I was kind of like, all right, are we going to recover from it? And they still haven't. So
supply chain makes me think of something though. Supply chain security.
Wow!
What a segue! Look at this guy.
God, you're just built for this. That is
you set him up, he knocks him down, right?
Yeah. So we did want to talk about that. Thanks, Derrick.
You're welcome.
So this has been a newish topic for me, so it might be good for our listeners to understand what that means. So anyone want to help define what we're talking about there?
I don't want to say there's a textbook definition, because every company trying to address it has their own definition. But the premise of supply chain security is knowing where all of your packages come from and have everything signed through the entire supply chain for it. Now, to set the stage in the open source world, we have it. It's very rare that you see something like, well, even Kubernetes, right? It's a conglomerate, or even Harvester, right? It's a conglomerate of other open source projects, and you need to kind of know what code is coming in where. And for the longest time, we had none of that. We were just kind of trusting it. Like, yeah, it works. Yeah, it's just, we pulled it from GitHub. That's their latest thing. And we realized that wasn't secure. And so what they've been trying to implement over the last couple of years is a level of supply chain security. And there's different ways to doing it. And I'm trying to be nice to other vendors who are solving it in different ways. But one of them is, was it Salsa? And I think we can talk about that for a little bit, but I'll take a breather. I mean,
Salsa's I guess the new framework that everybody's kind of working together on, a bunch of companies, not necessarily tech companies, right? Like, and I think Susan's involved with that, right? So it's and it's going to be a part of Rancher Prime. So yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely talk about that. Like, what's the intent of that? And like for the dummies perspective, which is me, just. This is a big problem in open source, kind of, Rob, like exactly what you said. Like, if you're building proprietary software, you probably know where all that's coming from. But in open source, there's this share and community and borrow and improve, and there's just not a lot of I guess, it's almost like an accountability thing, right? Like something could be out there and it could be malicious and you might not even know, or it could be exploited and you would have no idea. Mm-hmm. Derrick's kind of a security guru, so maybe you can weigh in on that.
There's different problems that all play into this that could be addressed. And when I say problems, there's different scale of issues that we're talking about. The most minute, simple version is, to Rob's point, where did my packages come from, right? But it becomes a rabbit hole issue of turning over rocks to go, oh, where did that come from? And where did that come from, right? So let me just give you an example. If you're SUSE and you're building Rancher lives on top of the management server, lives on top of Kubernetes. If we're talking RKE, those are distribution bits for Kubernetes, right? But in terms of Kubernetes and all of the projects that make up those bits, they are not the sole contributors to that project. There's other companies, there's random people. What becomes a bigger issue right now is there's no way, first of all, of standardizing across the industry the way that you do security checksums in terms of not only where something is coming from, but also how do we know it's not maliciously intent to begin with in the way that it's built or designed, right? And then secondly, more importantly, is even if you did have a standard for doing that, there's no way of guaranteeing that is actually implemented across the board industry-wide. So now you go to open source projects, and the whole idea behind SLSA and supply chain security in general is it's putting guarantees around where things are coming from, but also guarantees about how things are constructed. So let's not talk about Kubernetes for a second, but just a traditional software dev shop. If I go to release software from a build process into an environment, I want to be, every time I'm compiling a new piece of code, I'm running different types of checksums against it. And the same thing when it comes to deploying code. Since the point of which it was compiled and it was put into a repository of some kind for distribution, when I go to download said bits, have those bits been modified in flight? During the process of downloading it, did someone get in the middle of a connection and modify it? That's like the most I would say difficult scenario for it to even happen, because that involves man in the middle attacks and being in the middle of a connection and trying to instantiate modification to something that you're downloading while you're downloading, right? Mm-hmm. That's like the extreme end of the spectrum. But the most simple end of the spectrum, you're involved in an open source project and there's 50 people on it and they're from different companies or whatever. And part of the code has been contributed from the people that are directly contributing to this project, but there's another group that are contributing to that project outside of the 50 team members working on this specific piece of work. And that's all the derivative things that were pulled into this piece of work. So if I write a web app, all the derivative libraries that web app is leveraging were built by somebody else. How do I know? They robustly tested their thing from a security perspective. How do I know those bits are cryptographically signed and ensured that when they're getting pulled in, there wasn't man-in-the-middle attacks there? It becomes like a rolling problem where how far do you have to go to make sure we're safe, right? That's where supply chain security at length really becomes a much bigger problem, because it becomes an industry issue. It's not just, am I doing supply chain security for my deployment environment? Do I know where the packages for the things that I've downloaded, where they were built from? And do I know their dependencies, where they were built from? And are they still in the same state that they were intended to be built? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like that's in a nutshell, the biggest crux to the issue.
It seems like a big problem to solve. And like most things, it's going to be up to an organization to go, we care about this.
Well, it's partly you have to try and solve for the problem, but at the same time, you only have so many hours in the days, right? So It becomes a risk mitigation issue. Like, how much do we need to check and put checks and balances in place before we say good enough, because we're slowing down our ability to actually do the thing we're trying to do, which is build a product that customers are going to end up leveraging and using. I think that's really the thing that we have to be looking towards, aiming towards. What is that sweet spot of enough versus not overly trying to be so secure that we're slowing down our build process and our development process, that we're not actually building anything anymore. We're in paranoia mode constantly.
Your Chrome browser is giving you fits. We lost you for 10 seconds.
I don't know what I said. So, no, I don't know what was caught and what wasn't.
Security, important stuff. Something like that. No.
The long, or the short way of putting it, what is ultimately the right point at which we say we've done enough from a supply chain perspective that we can keep building things versus we're in paranoia mode about worrying where every bit and piece of something has come from, right? There has to be a point where the industry says this is good enough and you can't be expected to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge with all these new frameworks, right? So, Derrick, you would know this from your time in the DoD, the RMF. Risk management framework was, constructed to solve a problem, but the RMF has become the problem for getting things done. So,
because now you've slowed business to a halt. Yeah,
exactly. So it's, I think this is good. I mean, there's been a lot of exploits around, this use case in the last couple of years, and stuff I didn't even know about. I started asking around. And so it's definitely something that's needed, especially in our space where we focus on open source. It's a great idea. It's gonna take a lot of work. And I was talking to someone else, and they were like, you can do the work on the front end, or you can do the work reactively when everything's on fire. Which one do you want to do? And I'm like, depends. It's all
and I think when we look at like software development, we always put security is never written in as we're going, right? And Derrick and I could go on for miles about writing code. And when you're writing code, that's never part of a user story. It's always an afterthought because, product just goes, oh, it has to have X functionality. And we don't have a mindset of building that in as we're doing it. So it's always been reactive for us. And now we're trying to move it back up the stack, right? We talk down the stack when you're the closest to, being a system admin, up the stack being an actual developer, right? And now it's like, hey, can we start bringing this up the stack? And what tools can we put in place? But I mean, for years, I can tell you, anecdotally that we didn't care about security. It's like, it was like, if it happened, it was like, we'll address it because all of our product owners cared about was, now this is not being at SUSE, but all of our, previous product owners I've had has always been like, it has to do X functionality, blah, blah, blah. We don't care. They cared when it came to like processing a credit card, and that's pretty much that's all it was. But like back in the day, that wasn't part of it. And you're seeing a lot of these older apps as we're modernizing it. You guys probably see it more than I do today. You're seeing all that legacy that has to be reworked for, it's like, hey, did you actually think about that? No, well, we probably should as we're modernizing that through.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the reason why it's really crucial. Yeah, I mean, supply chain aside, that you have ways to truly mitigate risk or reduce your risk vector because you're never going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you build it into your software development lifecycle, let's just say, hey, we have secure code reviews weekly, and we make sure that people aren't vulnerable to SQL injection or cross-site scripting or whatever. Mistakes are made, even if supply chain security is perfect. We've done everything right to the letter. Log4j happens, right? Like there's no guarantee, no matter how tight you are on not just supply chain, but just in general security best practices, that things don't happen, whether by accident or by intention. So I think this is why it's really important that things like proper intrusion detection, prevention, and malicious attack, monitoring is really important. So like in terms of Kubernetes, people talk about how Kubernetes is way more complex and all these other things, and it is way more complex, but because everything is so software defined, it actually gives you a little bit of an advantage in this space. When you're using something like NuVector, right? Not only do you have the ability to have something like an intrusion detection and prevention system in place, but you can do it in a coordinated fashion because that kind of intrusion detection and prevention system can talk to the entire environment and can coordinate what things are able to talk to what from a networking perspective, what different variants of attacks look like, because it can see things end to end. It's not just looking at, oh, I'm a host-based intrusion detection system. I'm looking at this particular computer. Did someone try and open a shell? Or is there a virus on this computer, right? Like simple things like that. Those are great systems, but the reason why they're not going to work in Kubernetes is for a vast different number of reasons. But the benefit to the complexity of Kubernetes is that everything is accessible from this type of a system to be able to see and observe everything going on in an entire environment. That gives you a lot more of an intelligent way to respond to threats when they do occur, right? So I think that's where a greater emphasis, not only on doing things properly up front is really important, but really having sophisticated and advanced intrusion detection and prevention systems is really going to be key as these types of environments grow, to make sure that attacks aren't cascading across an environment and you're catching them quickly.
But you said something interesting there, the simplicity of Kubernetes, and it's not, right? We always talk about how it's not as simple as everyone makes it out to be. And,
right.
You know, I'm in the world of evangelizing and talking about getting started with Kubernetes, but I'll be the first one to tell anybody that if you're starting off, like, you need to know just enough to do your job, right? Because Kubernetes is a complex beast, and I think it was Kelsey said it was a platform to build a platform. There's so many extra pieces that you're adding on that one individual or even a team is going to struggle with every one of bits of those components. And as we see that, you know, it's like, how do you make Kubernetes simple, right? And I don't think it's really making it simple. It's knowing where you can put boundaries where maybe this is what you need to know about it, right? And what does the networking guy actually need to know about Kubernetes, right? Well, if he's not in the cluster itself, how much does he really care about it? I mean, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to say that the environment is people look at it as it's a way more complex thing, but by that complexity, we get access to this observability across an environment that we can't traditionally have, right? And that's where things like NewVector simplify the intrusion detection and prevention process, because they have access to so much more information to make intelligent decisions than a traditional intrusion detection system would.
Yeah, and I was asked once whether that would solve all of, you know, like NewVector, is it posed for everything? I was like, it manages what's in that cluster, right? But it's one tool in your entire infrastructure, right? You're going to have stuff that's going to be outside of that, right? You're going to need to be monitoring that's going to be outside of what NewVector does within a cluster. What it does is absolutely amazing, in my opinion, but outside of that, you need to have that holistic approach and then understand what's going on, because it might be coming from outside that cluster, trying to attack it within your own network, and that's a whole different problem that you might be having.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
All right, well, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a second.
Shadowsoft, a leading Kubernetes systems integrator, is excited to announce the launch of Kubernetes Academy, a free online education platform to teach the skills needed to become proficient in Kubernetes. The Shadowsoft Kubernetes Academy platform offers courses and resources for learners of all levels, from beginners just starting to learn about containerization to experienced professionals looking to dive deeper into the intricacies of Kubernetes. Kubernetes Academy is now available at academy.shadowsoft.com. Start learning today and join the thousands of IT professionals already on the path to becoming Kubernetes experts. Shadowsoft helps you make optimal possible.
All right. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, we were just talking about simplicity with Kubernetes and how that's, I don't know, probably something that needs to be reframed in the industry. Like, there's concept, like, Kubernetes can be simple in the way it's constructed, but that doesn't mean managing and scaling it is. And, you know, I love these articles. So there's an article from the Enterprisers Project. Shout out to them. Thank you for giving us something to talk about. And it's Kubernetes in 2023. 7 predictions for IT leaders. So we're just going to run through them and see what we agree or disagree, or we might agree with all of this. So, number 1, focus will sharpen on usability and simplicity. Oh, look at that. Interesting. It's funny how that just happened. So we kind of touched on that previously. So, Rob, maybe I ask you this, since this is literally what you do for a living, is talk to people about, these challenges. What are some of the areas that you've seen that people really struggle with in Kubernetes?
I would say they're told by their leadership, right, you got to learn Kubernetes, right? And they learn much more they try to bite off more than they can chew based on their role, right? So we, even last night I was at a tech meetup and told someone what I did, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm a Java developer, and it's on my list to learn it." And I'm like, "Well, how much are you going to learn?" Right? And I think that's where we don't like kind of lob off what you actually need to care about versus on your role. And I think I mentioned that earlier. And I think if we can simplify it, where you need to know what that is. Now, if you're a cluster manager or operator, you need to know a lot. In fact, you probably need to know every little, nut and bolt of the system.
Right.
But if you're a storage operator, like what do you care about, right? And how do you work with those teams to understand enough about storage within the cluster to support it when it's managing what's outside the cluster? Because storage is a different beast, especially when you're within the data center. And I think that's how you could simplify it based on particular roles. You'll see in small companies that they have like that one infrastructure IT guy who knows everything, who does everything, and who's burned out. That doesn't apply to them. That's a different problem with their personal management that they have. But in a traditional organization, people have particular roles, and it's how does that all tie together? And how do you care about just enough of Kubernetes to do your job versus trying to care about the whole thing? And if management, puts goals on, scope it to what these individuals do. Now, there's a difference, right? When you become in the developer world from a solution architect, where you worry everything that's inside your solution, to an enterprise architect where you have to worry about things outside of it. I think at that level, that's when you're going to, from someone from a developer rank, would have to take that deeper dive and understand, deeper concepts like ingress and what services and how pods, would work on a deeper level, right? But I think to simplify it is know what you need to know to do your job better versus trying to know it all. Derrick's scowling at me. I think he's got an opinion. Wait for it.
No, it's not like that. It's it always depends when people say simplicity on the persona they're referring to, and also to what the view of simplicity is. There's multiple ways of looking at this. So technically speaking, the tooling that's out there right now to use Kubernetes, if let's say you have a team that built things properly and they have enough experience to set up Kubernetes properly, there's tooling out there to make it much more simple. However, and this is a huge caveat, is that it's not all baked into any one particular solution, and it's not done in a way where it's simplified to different user personas for different types of things. So like, if someone's like, I'm a software engineer and I don't want to know anything about Kubernetes. Well, first of all, I think that's a huge mistake, because you should know how your software is going to scale in an environment, right? And how it's going to change. And how
minus front-end developers.
Works. Yeah, but I mean, do you ever run into a developer who says they're truly just a front-end developer anymore? I would argue there should be people who label themselves that way, but they always call themselves full stack. I use Node and Angular, and that makes me a full stack.
Hold up. I live with one. My wife is a React developer. She only does React, doesn't touch Java. She is CSS, React, and that's her entire world. If I ask her to learn Kubernetes, it would probably be an argument, like who's going to take the trash out or something.
That's one instance, though. How many times do you interview somebody and they claim they're a full stack developer, and they're actually a front end developer who does a little bit of Node, right? Well, like that's more what I'm getting at.
I blame recruiters for that, because they'll put on, we need a full stack developer. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, does he have to? Does that person actually know how to what part of the stack that you want him to be in, right? And I see that it's one of the most infuriating things I still see today. It's like, I'm looking for a full stack developer. What stack are you looking for? Well, they have to do everything, and I'm like, okay, so they're really broad, but they don't go in deep. Okay, you're going to get some pretty. You can get them to code it, but is it going to be the code you want to put to production? So I'm like, that's my personal opinion.
Either way, this is a tangent that I wasn't intending to go down, which is if you're a developer working on anything beyond just a UI, you're dealing with back-end APIs at all, right? You should understand at least a little bit enough about the environment to understand how it scales. But that being said, that's the side note, right? The more predominant note is even for people who go, I know enough, you could build out a tech stack that involves Fleet or Argo for CI/CD and build the right premise around how you use a cluster. But again, none of that is pre-baked anywhere. The whole process end to end is not pre-baked anywhere. And if you're not a developer, if you're talking about, to your point, a storage person, there's no like user interface for Kubernetes where there's a persona where you're just a storage guy, or there's a persona where you're just a networking guy, to your point, right? So the tooling's out there, but I think that the problem is how fast this world is evolving. It makes it impossible, well, not impossible, but improbable for an enterprise company, because it's traditionally enterprise companies that, and when I say enterprise, I mean enterprise only, right? Like a VMware type shop. That they go, and although they're getting more into open source, they've traditionally been successful at going, we've created an enterprise stack for doing virtualization. And so it's very persona driven. That type of maturity hasn't gotten into this type of tooling yet. So I think that's where the simplicity gap is really a bigger problem, because you can coach somebody to make their software development lifecycle and the way they use Kubernetes more simplistic, but it takes a tremendous amount of coaching and the right tools being leveraged, and then you have to manage those tools, which that becomes somebody's job. So
I guess I didn't think of it that way. It's like we have all the tools, but it's like you have to, I need, I'm the guy who just uses screwdrivers, but you give me a Swiss Army knife and it has 2 different screwdrivers on there, but I have 15 other tools. I need to like narrow it down. So I think that's a good point, is that we don't personify, who is on that traditional infrastructure team to need to know what, or the development team who needs to know what to make those tools kind of available, like that. Right. Persona tool best practice, it's like, hey, you're a developer, you need these tools, and if you're storage, you need these tools, but only use like those 2 ports, these tools. Don't use everything, you'll get confused. Right. All right, what's next on our list?
Next week we get to number 2. Just kidding. No, that's good, guys. Important stuff here. All right, number 2, Kubernetes goes to the edge. Duh.
I mean, it's been there. I think we talked about, Raspberry Pis making Nick coffee. So I don't see this as something new. I think this has been there. We're now starting to listen to industries in the way they need it done at their edge, right? Because we have like near edge, we can't even define edge correctly, right? Because I'd argue, if you got a few servers in your warehouse or your store somewhere, well, that's like an edge data center, right? I'd argue that, Yeah. If you have a couple Raspberry Pis running in a truck or something, well, that's an edge. It's just different use cases. And I think that's the hard thing, is we, as an entire industry, edge is something everyone defines differently. And the true companies that leverage edge, they're not going to, we need to answer their call first and the way they do things. So if you think about manufacturing, right? Like we come in very arrogantly saying, hey, this needs to work this way. And manufacturing is like, yeah, we have these entire systems. We've been doing it this way. We have these particular use case. Telecommunications would be another one, right? Like their needs are going to, like, we have to meet those needs. And I think we're starting to meet those needs in the past couple of years, and that we're going to see that going forward is we're going to start listening to those industries a lot more. Will I think that I'll see a Ford truck or a Toyota truck. I'm truck shopping right now, folks. That's why I could say both.
I get it.
Are we going to see Kubernetes running on it? What does it make sense, right? And it's like I can see it when it comes to the apps. If you think about it, if you look at the dashboard outside of like Apple CarPlay, you still have a handful of apps. Does it make sense that those are containers running and there's an underlying? Maybe I don't know. I don't even know if someone's doing that. I'm sure Ford's gonna tweet me on Twitter going like, "Hey man, we've been doing that forever. What are you talking about? So don't bash me, guys. I'm sorry."
Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
In terms of the one thing I want to hone in on that I think it needs more focus, and you've definitely mentioned it, but like we need to blow it up a little bit, is the lack of standard around what edge is, right? The reason why that's not just a big deal in terms of like defining what the edge is to make the article make sense, but in terms of even what the purpose is for how Kubernetes is going to get used, and going back to the last thing, user personas, how you want to manage those different variants of what edge might be looks very different depending situationally on what you mean by edge. So if we're talking about like a near edge, far edge, IoT level edge, where you're literally talking about like an edge device, maybe it's your refrigerator, it's about two things. It's about scale, and also what are the types of things that are potentially going to run on those types of workloads. So if we talk about like near edge, which maybe we call like smaller remote data centers, they're pretty much doing the same thing as regular data centers, but you probably have less of them. You might have like 20 of them. So really the end goal then becomes, from a management perspective, how do you manage 20 Kubernetes clusters? But if we're talking edge as in Raspberry Pis or refrigerators, the use case might be, how do you manage 10,000 of these things? And then also, or maybe even 100,000 of these things. And then maybe the end use case result is, well, those Kubernetes clusters are going to be designed because they're on specialized hardware. For a refrigerator, they're only going to display a web interface for a screen. Maybe you want to manage it differently because of that. So to your point, I feel like what needs to almost happen, like Edge is already adopting Kubernetes. That's obviously true. But what needs to happen is somebody industry-wise needs to start labeling what the different Edge use cases are, so that way we can start building as a community tools that make sense for managing these different types of use cases for Edge, because I think they're going to look very different depending on what the actual implementation is supposed to be.
I completely agree. I think where we can define, like I could say, Derrick, define a container for me, right? We have a standard. You can just throw it back to me, like, what are you talking about? We can do that. Yeah. With the Edge, we don't have that. And I think if we can kind of define that, it will help when we're talking about it, when we're framing it, and then that, what are those best practices? Because I hear that a lot. What's the best practice for X? And I'm like, well, it depends, right? And now we're starting to see best practice.
That's my favorite. It's best practices. I'm like, great. there's a lot of options there.
Yeah. I mean, they're a framework, though, right? Best practice is a framework that every company should say, hey, we're going to start with this, and let's build on what makes sense for our organization.
For sure, yeah. But I think sometimes like organizations don't see it that way. They go, what is software manufacturers' best practices? And it's not really the right viewpoint. The right viewpoint is, what is your use case and what is the best way to construct this? So, number 3. Service mesh, try service meshes. I'm going to get out of the way.
We're still talking about service mesh?
Do they explain what the context of what they're saying is? Like, they're expecting there to be more service meshes? Are they expecting there to be clusters where you're joining different service meshes, or multiple service meshes in the same? Like, do they expand what they say at all?
So there's a quote in here. There will be a lot more utilization of federated service meshes. Company A's mesh interacting with Company B's mesh directly, as an example.
I mean, let's just think of it from a company perspective. Companies have trust issues, and rightfully so, right? And our standard way of communicating between companies is an API, right? And how long did that take to get like, hey, we have an open API, you can feel free to consume it, and we're gonna follow these standards with it, and we're gonna be good stewards of it. There's gonna be no breaking changes. We'll modify as we go up. If we have to make a breaking change, we'll let you know and we'll communicate it. And now we're going to try the service mesh in that same capacity. And I'm looking at it going like, who's really going to adopt that? Because I mean, I can't commit on where we're going to eat dinner tonight. One, and two, I don't trust my wife well enough to pick the restaurant because I live in an area where we don't have good restaurants. So I'm probably going to be disappointed. So I have trust issues. I mean, I don't know how this is gonna work. I have questions. Like this one, I see it. There's a good use case, but I don't know. Derrick?
I agree, but I have a specific opinion, which is I think this is what people want, which is why they say it in the article. But just because you want something doesn't mean it's feasible, especially feasible right now. So like there is a couple of service messages. The main one that people talk about is Istio, right? That are based on Envoy, but not all service meshes are based on Envoy. And moreover, not everyone is implementing service meshes in the same way, nor are they implementing service meshes with the same tech stack. And not even everybody is using service meshes because they think it's overly complicated. I think this is like a 2025 problem, maybe. If we standardize enough that we can make service meshes go, okay, everyone's using the same kind of schema and methodology for communicating between these environments. Because if we don't have a standard way of doing that, I see this as a very weird situation where like, hey, maybe 5%, 10%, 15% of the market is using Istio out of all the people using service meshes. And then they're only able to work with certain vendors because they are also using Istio, right? But they can't work with a bunch of other vendors because they're not Istio based or Envoy based, right? Like I just see that this is a panacea of what somebody wants, and it's just not going to happen at all this year.
Yeah, it's can you define service mesh? And
right.
like we're back to that. Hey, can you define a container? Yeah, I can define it. Like OCI that helps me define what a container is. Okay, can we do that with service mesh? Well, maybe. I don't know. Well, I feel it's this. I feel it's that.
I mean, this was the easiest one for me to go, yeah, no. And I'm not technical like you guys. So
it's just too early. It's just way too early for someone to say
it's a super complicated, just like service mesh for customers is just complicated anyway. So what, we're going to start meshing meshes?
Yeah, I'm going to go, and this is probably going to get me trashed on Twitter. I think we would see a Linux desktop. The year of the Linux desktop would happen first before like this service mesh interacting with company A from B. We'll get a Linux desktop. A year of the Linux desktop will happen first.
I think what will definitely come first in this regard is people having two kube clusters where their service meshes are interacting with each other, which is possible. You can use things like Glue Mesh to do that. But it is, if you're not using something like Glue Mesh, it is not an easy thing to set up, maintain, and continually use, right? If that's not even standardized, I can't get, two of my clusters in my own environment to easily communicate. How the hell do I expect to do this with people who own their own environments separate from mine? I just it's way too much, way too soon. There's no way.
All right, what's our next one here?
Industry verticals turn to Kubernetes as a transformation agent.
Ooh.
I'm going to go first, and then you guys are going to tell me I'm wrong.
Go ahead.
I just no, I don't think so. Like Kubernetes is a huge growth area in technology. It is transformational in what it is, but like not at the industry level. Like it's transformational at the technology level. What can we do now that we have this? There's like business people don't give a crap about this stuff. And I think I'm not saying they never will, but I think we're probably years away from, the business going, Kubernetes will help us sell more sweaters. It's just not a thing.
Can I go first? Because I'm going to.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. It's not transformational to your business. It might be transformational to how you run your business in terms of roles and responsibilities of engineers, because their understanding of the platform and how they're going to leverage it is going to change from what they originally did. No argument there, but it is not going to change your business. Artificial intelligence used properly could change your business. Sure. Kubernetes is a management plane for things. It does not transform your business. It transforms how you operate and maintain and run your business, technologically speaking.
All right. So I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here and say,
yay,
yes.
I'm gonna say it can, and here's why. Because I've never seen a traditional lift and shift of any legacy code running on retail servers being just arbitrarily thrown into a cluster and it works magically, because it doesn't happen. Because if it would, I mean, most of us would be out of business, right? It's just not going to happen. So I think where it's a transformation agent is it's now putting focus that C-level needs to see. We're needing to rewrite some of these apps. We're needing to modernize these apps. And I think it's changing the tech stack and things like older version of Java, just things like that. It's modernizing their code base, because they can't just pick it up and move it, right? Because it's not working. So I think it is, but it's not it's not going to sell more sweaters. Now, what it will do is, well, you're going to attract better developers, right? You're going to check better staffing. Why? Because I'll be honest with you, if I was told I'm like, oh, I'm going to work on Java 8 or Java 17 or whatever the latest version is, what do you want to work on? The old crappy legacy stuff? Or do you want to be working on newer, where do you want to be in that? And if you talk to someone out of a coding camp, or you talk to someone in their career, they're like, I don't want to be doing VB6 anymore. I'm tired of this. I want to be moving it up. So I think it could, but it's not going to sell you more sweaters. It might get you better staff, but it might set you up for a better code base down the road. So I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate.
So I agree with you. I agree with you, but I guess it's subjective to what someone means by transformative.
Sure.
And maybe I'm reacting too quickly to the word transformative, because the way that you're saying it, I 100% agree with you. Yes. Yeah. I guess when I think of transformative, especially when they say transform, an agent for transformation, to me that reads like, I'll just use this, it's easier for me to talk to an example than specifics, but like the way that Domino's was a pizza business changed into a logistics company that happens to sell pizza, where like they track the way pizza gets delivered to your front door. And like literally they've talked about this internally. They have they used to be almost primarily all just shops of people working at a pizzeria. And now they're like 99% IT personnel. And they're a much smaller, draft of people that are actually facilitating the pizza making process. That to me is how I see transformative, but that's just the way that I was looking at it. The way you're talking about it, I 100% agree with
you. Domino's is an example, and we're a Domino's house here. Domino's for us is it's like a tech company that has a pizza problem. That's how I always look at it. Because like when you see like the app, and they had a blip yesterday where my wife couldn't order on the app, and you would have thought world ended because we needed pizza. We had date night for the kids, and we were like, kids needed to eat. And the app had a problem. But I think that's when I see that. But also when you modernize, you think of you think of the new processes, right? If I have to rewrite it, then why is the product coming in here? So I think if it's framed correctly, maybe, but if it's not framed correctly, I'm going to agree with you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's subjective is what we're saying.
Yeah. All right. What's our next?
All right. So 5 is community battens down the supply chain security hatches. We've already talked about this, so we're going to skip this.
Yeah.
Okay.
See ya.
Number 6, we kind of touched on this just a second ago. Kubernetes and Java ? What
is this?
No one wants to talk about that, do we? No, Derrick does.
I'll keep it short. I think this is also kind of subjective. Because
what are they asking though? Let's set the stage. Are they saying like it's Java going to replace is it going to replace some of the things that build apps for Kubernetes, right? Because I always conceptualize them differently. Java is to build apps that run in Kubernetes, where Go, Rust, those are things that run. There are apps that you build that run for Kubernetes, right? So those, if we conceptualize it, are they saying that Java is going to replace Go? Like that would be pretty inflammatory.
No, I think that they're talking about getting rid of Java
that
as a primary language for software development for things that end up in Kubernetes, because that's been talked about a lot. So I think that's what they're referring to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick.
No, I agree. I think they're basically saying like, Java's not going anywhere, and it's eventually going to find its way on Kubernetes if the use case of the application fits. Which is kind of, of course. I think we would all agree with that. But
yeah, this is where I think it's subjective towards like, because the question, because I glanced over this article before we started, I think they were trying to hone in on like, is Java going to be completely dead because of Kubernetes? Because anyone who wants to go into Kubernetes is never going to use Java, and that's a no. But what Java looks like in Kubernetes in general is definitely different than what it looked like. Like middleware servers, Tomcat, Jetty, WebSphere, WebLogic. There's no place in this environment. They were trying to facilitate a lot of what Kubernetes was going to eventually do before Kubernetes was a thing for Java specifically. Mm-hmm. They wanted to talk about how you could share a process across different server instances and do session replication. Like it was doing a lot of those things. So there's no place for that. So at that point, it becomes like, well, what remains and why keep it? And I would say what remains is probably the two more primary used frameworks now. And frameworks is even, I would put in air quotes, Spring Boot and Quarkus. Quarkus is a lot more than a framework. So I don't really want to put it under that connotation. What I'd say is confusing about it. The reason people want to argue keep Java in Kubernetes is because people have used Java for forever, and they don't want to get rid of all their engineers. They want to repurpose their skill sets. But if you go to Quarkus, for example, it's different. It's not like, yes, the syntax is the same, but programming on Tomcat in a servlet is way different than programming in Quarkus. Mm-hmm. So it begs the question at that point, like, yeah, Java's still going to be around, but is it going to be around in the same quantities that it was previously? And I think the answer to that's probably no. And it just depends situationally.
I'm a .NET fanboy, so like for me, a business programming language, I'd go, oh, what's .NET doing? But that's just me personally. Yeah. I like the new direction. Twitter's gonna be a gas later, I'm sure. I know I don't hate it. Everyone on Twitter don't like you can't have it. You can't like something on Twitter because they think you're automatically against something. It's like, hey, I'm pro .NET doesn't mean I'm anti Java, folks. So stop.
No, you have to pick.
That's it.
Yeah, it's like everything else.
Sucks for me because I'm the most middle ground person you'll ever meet about things.
And as of late, I write Rust like a masochist because Rust is not forgiving. Okay. So like for me, it's like you go from like .NET to Rust, and everyone's just like, when you go back to .NET, you're like, oh, it's amazing, it's so easy, it's so great. And you go to Rust, you're like, God, this go. It's like. It separates you. It separates the engineers really quickly. Like it separates developers really quickly when you have to like worry about the things you have to with Rust. I'll get off that high horse. All right.
No, you're good. You're good.
That was short. That was impressive. Last one. This is lightning round. This is 1 minute each.
Okay.
2023 and beyond. Kubernetes and quantum.
No. I'll just make that easy. Just
love it.
The use case is so like it's so small. It's just like big players are doing it, and what is it solving? What is it solving for? Like, I don't know. Let's just pick on any retailer. Let's pick on like Cabela's, right? What does it solve for? What is quantum solving for Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop? Shop there, so I can say that. What is it going to solve? Like if you're the CIO of one of those companies, and I don't know who the CIO or CTO is of Bass Pro Shops, but if you're the CTO, like what is it solving for you? Like And I think that's that industry driver. Now, if it's like, you know, we're trying to be the first one there, and there's a bigger use case, or we're trying to like create cold fusion or some shit like that. Excuse me, sorry. There's some stuff like that. You're gonna bleep that, and I can completely get it. But like for, you know, the industries that are, you know, adopting and going like all in with some of these technologies, I don't see it, but I could be wrong.
So I'm not a huge quantum guy, and by that I mean I haven't looked at depth with it. The biggest use cases people traditionally talk about it for is things like, from again security background, right? Cryptanalysis, breaking RSA, you know, really just destroying the way that we encrypt things, because you could hypothetically work on a cryptographic message so quickly you could disseminate it instead of hundreds of years. It's like, you know, an hour, right? In theory. So I don't see Kubernetes like, and this is just in my head, I don't see Kubernetes being like, we're going to deploy Kubernetes on quantum. That just sounds stupid. But if quantum usage is anything like GPUs, in the sense of like, you can do really like complex math at scale very quickly, I see it as more, if that does happen, there will probably be some kind of like interface for being able to offload certain types of workloads or patterns to a quantum device that a kube cluster is able to communicate with. So like if, for example, you were like, oh, I want to run a data science workload in Kubernetes, and you're using Hadoop and Apache Storm and all these other things, there might be a piece of what you're doing that gets funneled off to a quantum computing. That's the only way I could see it, but like it's completely up in the air. Like I don't know enough to say that's even physically possible. Probably, but who knows?
Okay.
So I'll say this. I didn't know much about quantum computing. I still don't. I don't know SHIT, as Rob would say, about that. I talked to someone about this in like great depth about 9 months ago. Like, tell me about quantum computing. Somebody who like knows something. And I had a headache by the end of it. So I agree with Rob here. No. Because we have a hard time defining the simple things that we do understand just with Kubernetes, like service meshes. Quantum is not going to cross over. There's just no way. Like, not enough people know anything about it. So it's kind of like a salacious
expensive thing. It'll be ridiculously expensive. Like you're not going to have enough of a draw because of the cost for a use case to do anything with it. Like,
sure.
They put this in the article to add an extra keyword for you to Google search against. That's what it was for.
Yeah, I agree. This is it's a great article. We love these guys. We love these guys at the Enterprisers Project. Kevin Casey, he's a great author. We like him a lot. We've just spent 30 minutes talking through the article, you know, positively. So I'll just say that. But like, yeah, sometimes we just put things in there to get everybody's juices going. So
yeah,
I think that's where we're at. All right. Well, this is supposed to be a short one. This ended up being an hour. We're good at this. So
every time you say it's short, it's like an hour. Like you schedule 15 minutes and we're over an hour already. It's every time.
We'll get better at this. Maybe we'll see.
Maybe
guys, thanks for hanging out. It was a good conversation, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
Dynatrace exists to make the world's software work perfectly. Their unified software intelligence platform combines broad and deep observability and continuous runtime application security with the most advanced AI ops to provide answers and intelligent automation from data at an enormous scale. This enables innovators to modernize and automate cloud operations, deliver software faster and more securely, and ensure flawless digital experiences. That is why the world's largest organizations trust Dynatrace to accelerate digital transformation.